Hello everyone. Today we will be beginning examining the Persian Wars. So yesterday's lesson is about, or was about the Persian Empire and how it came together and what it was all about. And in order to understand the cataclysmic events that occurred between this Persian Empire and these tiny Greek city-states, you have to understand the Persian Empire itself. So that was yesterday's lesson. Today we'll focus on the first round of the Persian Wars with the Greeks. So by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to identify the reason for the revolt of the Greek city-states, the Ionian city-states, against the Persians, and you will be able to identify the reason for the Persian Wars beginning. You will also be able to analyze the Battle of Marathon and its long-term effect both on history and on these on this time period for the Greeks and the Persians. So let's get into it. So there's a Greek revolt. The Persians control almost all of Asia Minor, and we'll check the map out, but there's a small area where there's a few Greek city-states, and as the Persian Empire is expanding, some of these Greek city-states in Asia Minor, in the western portion of modern-day Turkey, are going to revolt in the year 499 BCE. And I talked about how Cyrus, who started the empire, and later especially Darius, they rule but with tolerance. They allow these conquered peoples to keep their customs, and that didn't matter to the Greeks. The Greeks didn't want to be ruled by anyone. They have that, as we talked about, government with the Greeks. They have an independent streak, and they like democracy. And so because these Greeks enjoyed democracy and various forms of democracy, they were not okay with being ruled by an emperor from thousands of miles away. So the Greek city-states that revolt, they receive some help from the Greek city-state, the powerful Greek city-state of Athens, which sends soldiers to help the revolt against Persia. And so we'll go here. We're talking, this is Asia Minor. If you know your map, which you should by now, this is Greece. And the city-state of Athens, located right over here, is going to send some, they're going to send some aid to these city-states over here, the Ionian city-states. And so when they do this, it really offends Darius and the Persians. Although the Persians end up putting down the revolt and defeating it, that wasn't really the issue. The issue is that, for number one, the Greeks had the audacity, the gall, the backbone to think that it was okay that they could revolt against this emperor who believed he was a god king, as most of these Persian emperors did. They believed that they were very friendly and tolerant rulers, and who would ever want to revolt against a perfect ruler like that and a perfect empire like the Persian Empire? The second piece of this is, who do these Athenians think they are, sending soldiers over there to aid other Greeks? Okay, so Darius swore to get revenge on the Greek city-state of Athens for sticking their nose into a situation that they had no business being in. So although the Greek city-states over here of Ionia end up being reconquered by the Persian Empire, by Darius, he swears revenge, and so there is going to be a war, an invasion of the Greeks over here. Okay, and so this is what warfare looked like at that time period. The Greeks, it's called a hoplite, was a well-armored soldier like this, and so they're fighting with spears, swords, and arrows, and shields, of course. So the Persian invasion. Darius he led a Persian invasion of Athens, which is the Greek city-state that stuck their nose in, 9 years later, in the year 490 BCE. And this invasion begins the Persian Wars, a series of wars between the Greek city-states resisting the Persian Empire, the massive Persian Empire. And remember, these city-states view themselves as independent little countries and nations. They don't like to work together very often, and they were going to be forced to do so to defeat, or try to defeat, the Persian Empire. We'll see how that goes. So the Persian Wars begin where the Persian Empire attempts to conquer Greece, but also expand into Europe. Essentially, the main idea, the central idea of this is these Greek city-states here are guarding the doorway to all of Europe that goes up into here. And if that happens, civilization, Western civilization, our culture and civilization as it is in this United States of America is based on European development and ancient history. And if the Greeks lost these Persian Wars, we wouldn't be here today with the culture that we have. The Persians would have won, and history would be enormously different for us. So Darius invades with a force of about 15,000 men, a very large force. And he attacked, and remember, he's bringing his archers, his cavalry, his infantry, and his immortals, that large, well-organized military fighting machine from all over the Persian Empire. They call it the 1,000 Nations of the Persian Empire because of all these different tribes and groups. And all of these men from these different places with these fighting abilities are coming, and they're attacking just a little city-state of Athens with their army of about 11,000 men. Okay? The Athenians asked for... They had asked for assistance, and the rest of the Greek city-states said, hey, you're the one that upset the Persians. You deal with it yourself. You made the enemy. And if we come help you, then we're going to make an enemy of them, and we don't want that right now. You deal with it. So they do. And at the Battle of Marathon, a pinnacle moment in Western civilization and in Greek history, Greek ancient history, the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE. So they fought, they being the Athenians, and their 11,000 men, and the Persians and their 15,000 men fight on the plains, the flat plains of Marathon, a little ways outside of the city-state of Athens. And during this time, the Athenian city-states are ready to evacuate. If they lose this battle, and they are undermanned, obviously, they are outnumbered, their city-state's going to be burned to the ground, and people will be slaughtered and enslaved. So the people are very anxiously awaiting if the Athenian army can win this battle or not, and it doesn't look like it's good odds for them. Okay, so the Greeks were outnumbered, but they had a few things going their way. They had stronger weapons, and they had better leaders with better tactics. And tactics are really your battle plans, how you intend on taking the field and fighting, especially a larger group than you have by several thousand men. So the Greeks, their battle plan is to spread out in one straight line, a single file line, which is not how you generally fight in ancient war. And they took the Persians off guard by charging at them suddenly and screaming at the top of their lungs with their swords out and charging them. And they caught these Persians off guard, and they weren't prepared for this. It was crazy. It was madness. And so the Persians turn and quickly start getting surrounded by these Athenians, screaming at them and sprinting at them fearlessly with nothing to lose, really. I mean, if they lose their civilization, their city-state, it's over. That means that their families, and older people and women and children, they're going to be killed or enslaved. Their city-state will be burned to the ground. This was a must-win situation here. And so it forced these Persians to retreat back to their boat. In the end, the Persians lost 6,500 men, and it was a complete slaughter. And the Athenians lost just 192 on the battlefield. This is an impressive victory, more than impressive victory, almost an impossible victory against a stronger enemy. And it's really cool. There's a story about a couple days later, the Spartans do show up, and they had a religious holiday going on, and that's why they said, the Spartans are the best warriors in the ancient world, but they're not helping the Athenians until they solve their own problems, but also until that holiday is over. And when they arrive at the battlefield, they count these bodies up, and they find these 6,500 Persians dead and just 192 Athenians, and they say, oh my God, they're not known for war, but this is just absolutely one of the greatest victories in Greek history, okay? And here's what the Athenians did. Their battle plan here, their tactic was to line up in a straight line and sprint. And when they did, it's called a pincer move. And it's like a pincher. And so they envelop these Persian line here, and then they rally back to the center and do it again, and it pushes these Persians back towards their boats. And so really it cuts them off and surrounds them, and all that the Persians had to do was break this Athenian line, and the battle would have been over. But they were taken so off guard that they were pushed back, and they were enveloped on each side. And by enveloping them on the side, the Persians retreated to their boats, and they did not expect this to happen. This is just one of these, famous illustrations of this battle. So, what happens is that the Athenians win the battle. A very, very impressive battle that they win. However, they do not make Darius or the Persians very happy with this, and there's going to be a round 2 later on. Unfortunately, Darius will die before he gets his second chance, but the next king, the next emperor, the next god king of the Persians, Xerxes, will take his shot at them, and that will be our next lesson. Long term, they have victory. And there's a legend, a legend that comes out of this victory, this great victory. The legend tells us that a messenger from the Athenian army ran with the message that the Battle of Marathon was won, and he runs all the way from the battlefield to Athens in like one full sprint, just runs all the way there with every ounce of energy he has, and he brings news of the victory. And this was so important to do because they don't have radio, telephones, text messages, emails. I mean, word of mouth. He had to run there. And the people of Athens, remember, are very anxious. They're very on edge that this, if the Athenian army gets defeated, they're going to be slaughtered and enslaved, and their city's going to be burned down, and their existence is over, and they'll be wiped out of history. And so he runs the 26 miles back from the plains of Marathon to the city of Athens, the city-state of Athens. And that distance today is the distance of a marathon race. The Boston Marathon, the New York Marathon, that race is 26.2 miles. And so, since that distance is almost the exact same distance, a marathon today is named after this legendary run from the true Battle of Marathon. And when he arrives, his name is, I think it's Philippides, and he yells, "Rejoice, we conquer!" And legend tells us that he then drops dead from exhaustion on the ground after delivering this news. And so that's what a marathon is named after, and that's why a marathon is these 26 miles. Okay, and so here's an illustration of this Greek messenger running back to deliver the news. And in ancient Greece today, he is celebrated as the first runner of a marathon. And a marathon, again, is named a marathon. That race gets its name because of this Battle of Marathon. Okay, and the victory that it marks the victory that the Athenian army had over the Persians. Again, it will only be the first round. The second round will be 10 years later in 480 BCE, and it will be a very different and even more highly unlikely conflict for the Greeks to win. And we'll get to that in next class.